He lifted me onto the counter with ease, parting my knees gently, kissing the inside of my thigh with a reverence that felt both sacred and forbidden. He murmured, his tongue playfully dancing, "You taste exactly as I envisioned." Delicate yet dangerous, I inhaled, my fingers entwined in his hair. Join me as I unfold the unexpected narrative of the moment my daughter's fiancé caught me in a rather compromising situation. I truly appreciate your time spent watching the video and your thoughtful comment. Your kindness means a great deal to me. The tale will unfold once more in the near future, so keep your eyes peeled. His presence nearby had gone unnoticed by me. It was only after I straightened, water still clinging to my thighs, steam rising against the mirror-like smoke from a fire already ignited, that I reached for the towel, the worn piece with the tattered edge, the one I habitually grasped when the house lay in silence. Having just stepped out of the shower, I stand bare and unapologetic, my skin radiant and soft to the touch. I adjusted my position, fingers weaving through my wet hair, and in that moment, I noticed the silhouette hovering in the entrance. He discovered himself adrift in the fabric of time, his fingers clasping the doorknob, ensnared in a fleeting moment of tranquility. His presence was never intended for this place. He ought not to have been looking at me in such a way. I, too, discovered myself ensnared in stillness. Breathe in fully, release without a sound. At first, my body betrayed me. I laid bare my vulnerabilities. I held back from grasping the towel. I found myself captivated by his gaze, feeling the warmth of his eyes as they roamed over me, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. His name hung in the air, caught in the confines of my throat. Thomas, my daughter's fiancé, her cherished golden child, the young man who referred to me as ma'am in our first 3 meetings. I extend my sincerest apologies. His voice quivered, deep and almost raspy, yet he stood resolute. His gaze lingered, his eyes descended, and yet I stood unmoved. I permitted him to look. A fragment of my being longed for him to do so. It was a brief interlude, perhaps 3 seconds or maybe 4, before he shut the door with a firm thud, and I could hear his footsteps quickly receding into the distance. The corridor wrapped around him, but my heart continued to ache with unease. My hand trembled as I wrapped myself in the towel, gripping it firmly against my chest, as if I could somehow hold back the storm of events that had just transpired. I should have felt a pang of shame. In that moment, I experienced a profound sense of vitality. That night, I found myself in bed, grappling with my thoughts long after I would have preferred to admit. I closed my eyes, striving to focus on the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the distant hum of traffic, and the soothing rhythm of my husband's snore drifting down the hallway. Yet all I could feel was the warmth blooming on my cheeks, the fluttering in my stomach, the persistent thrum between my thighs. I clenched my legs together, wrestling with the memories of Thomas's gaze, which appeared to linger on every inch of my skin, on my lips, and on the part of me he had no right to behold, yet did. The next morning, he averted his gaze from mine. I found myself in the same predicament. He sat at the kitchen island, watching my daughter engrossed in her phone. She remained blissfully ignorant. She hummed softly, a melody of joy spilling forth as she spoke of wedding menus and seating arrangements, while Thomas stared into his coffee as if it contained the key to a distant escape. I placed a plate in front of him, and our fingers brushed against one another with a delicate touch. It was just a gentle brush of knuckles, yet the spark that ignited between us nearly took my breath away. Even in silence, the air between us crackled with unspoken thoughts, and that afternoon, I found myself crossing paths with him again in the hallway. His hand brushed against my hip, both gentle and purposeful, a soft murmur of intention in the caress. The feeling persisted, stretching into an eternity. I comforted myself with the notion that it bore no importance. On that specific evening, my husband became engrossed in his work, continuing long after the sun had dipped below the horizon. My daughter lingered in her room, absorbed in a lively FaceTime conversation. The house was shrouded in silence. As I descended the stairs, I filled a glass with wine, my bare feet gliding over the cool floor, still wrapped in the silk slip that lingered beneath my robe. In the living room, Thomas remained seated, his eyes locked onto the screen. The sound silenced. He lifted his eyes as I entered the room, his lips parted with the faintest hint of anticipation. I found myself teetering on the edge of yielding to sleep. I observed. He nodded, yet his body remained motionless. I did not either. An electric tension hung in the air, a tangible weight that cloaked the surroundings. As I approached the counter, a sense of anticipation filled the atmosphere. He stood up and moved toward me with a measured slowness, each step exuding a sense of languor. "You looked beautiful," he murmured, his voice a soft caress in the air. This morning, a tightness seized my throat. "Thomas, I never meant to look so deeply. I simply found myself unable to stop." I swallowed hard. "You really shouldn't say that," I whispered. I recognized that he inhaled life. Then his hand brushed against my arm, a mere whisper of a touch. I turned to face him directly. His gaze lingered on my lips before drifting downwards. I did not back down. He leaned in closer. I permitted him to come closer, and as his lips finally met mine, an electric hesitation lingered in the atmosphere, both thrilling and daunting. He kissed me with the weight of a secret he had started to mourn. As his hand slipped beneath the hem of my slip, finding the bare skin between my thighs, a gasp escaped his lips. "I shouldn't," he murmured. "Indeed, you embody that already," I observed. Warmth emanated from his fingers. Curious, they rose, brushing against the boundary, lightly touching the inner part of my thigh, as if he were ensnared in a fragile ballet of intrigue and withdrawal. My breath hitched in my throat as his knuckle grazed the spot that was already slick with longing. He remained motionless, ensnared in a fleeting instant of incredulity, looked skyward. "You're not wearing anything beneath this," he whispered gently, a fusion of questioning and doubt. I did say it was hardly perceptible. I had not foreseen that anyone would notice my presence. He exhaled with a slow, wavering rhythm, reminiscent of someone lost beneath the depths of the ocean, and I became the last whisper of existence. Once again, our lips lingered in the realm of the unspoken, untouched. This is not the first occurrence. He remained close, his hand resting against me, as though he struggled to comprehend my presence, afraid that I might vanish if he moved too abruptly. "Please, just tell me to stop," he whispered. I did not do that. I found myself unable to do so. I reached out, my fingers brushing against his wrist, guiding his hand to the exact spot I sought. His fingers moved over me, slow and hesitant, as though he were uncovering something divine. My head tilted backward. Her lips parted, a soft whisper of breath slipping away. Alas, he emitted a soft, low groan. "I kindly ask that you avoid making that statement. Your actions will lead to my demise." Before I could restrain my impulse, I felt the fleeting touch of his fingers against mine. With thighs quaking and breath held tightly within my chest, I clutched the edge of the counter. A desperate effort to stave off the impending collapse to the ground. He stood motionless, his eyes locked onto my face, as though it were the most authentic thing he had ever come across. I pulled him into a kiss, infused with a longing that made me shiver, deeply intense, startlingly quick, teetering on the edge of a fire that might engulf us entirely. His body pressed against mine, solid and yearning, and I instinctively reached down, my fingers curling around him through the fabric of his jeans. He breathed out, his breath mingling with mine. This is a path we ought to avoid. We are already immersed in it. On that fateful night, we made the decision to remain where we were, refraining from any further exploration. A door slammed shut on the upper floor. Her voice resonated, light and unburdened, infused with a clarity that echoed the innocence I once held dear. We drew back from each other. I made a subtle alteration to my slip. He withdrew, his fingers grazing the fabric of his jeans, his chest rising and falling with quickened breaths. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I misspoke, expressing myself too hastily and with too much openness. He locked eyes with me for a fleeting moment, then turned and left without a word. Sleep eluded me, leaving me restless in the stillness of the night. The sheets wrapped around me, their embrace both tight and unsettling. My skin radiates an unusual warmth. I lay there, fully alert, captivated by the soft resonance of her laughter wafting through the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, his image surfaced as I approached my peak. I returned to it, breathing deeply, relishing every sensation until the boundaries between shame and desire faded away. The subsequent days unfolded under a shroud of disquieting silence, a stillness that rendered me perpetually alert. He maintained his distance, positioning himself on the far side of the room, opting to leave dishes in the sink instead of handing them to me. Still, I couldn't help but notice his gaze, always lingering, always observing. As though his body held a deep-seated understanding, his mind persisted in its defiance of reality. One afternoon, while I meticulously folded laundry in the guest room, he moved gracefully by, his hand brushing softly against my waist. Not challenging, just adequate. I stood firm. I let it reveal itself in its own time. The silence between us morphed into a language uniquely its own, a heavy tension, an unarticulated query that hung in the air, one we both feared to express. Then came the evening she set off for her bachelorette weekend. For 3 days, it will be just the two of us. The house towered above, its stillness echoing with an unforeseen weight. I crafted a humble meal and opened a bottle of wine. I was confident she would not miss her target. He stepped into the kitchen barefoot, dressed in a snug gray shirt that embraced his torso. His hair clung to his forehead, while his eyes shimmered with an unusual depth. He sat in silence, pouring a glass and taking a seat across from me, his gaze fixed on my meal, as if he longed for something that transcended the simple act of dining. As I lifted my plate to take it to the sink, he followed closely behind, silent and resolute, devoid of both words and hesitation. He drew closer, his warmth enveloping me from behind, lips brushing softly against my shoulder as his hand encircled my waist. "Your voice lingers in my mind," he murmured. Your presence brushed against my fingertips, and my knees buckled beneath me. I grasped the counter tightly, Thomas. He twirled me, his lips meeting mine with a slow, gentle passion. This time, undeniably deeper, he lifted me onto the counter with ease, parting my knees gently, kissing the inside of my thigh with a reverence that felt both sacred and forbidden. He murmured, his tongue playfully dancing, "You taste exactly as I envisioned." Delicate yet dangerous, I inhaled, my fingers entwined in his hair. As he led me to ecstasy once more, his mouth consumed me as though he would cease to exist in that very moment. As he stood, my fingers quivered while I unfastened his belt, liberating him from his restraints. He exuded warmth and substance in my hold, already beginning to seep. I gently caressed him, relishing the way his hip quivered forward, the way his jaw tightened. "What is it that you yearn for?" "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I yearn for each and every one of you." He positioned me on the counter, delivering a singular, intense thrust that left me gasping for air. I wrapped my legs around him, my arms cascading over his neck. Our foreheads met, a tender link as he entered me, slow and deep, leaving a path of devastation behind. In our quietude, our gestures conveyed a profound narrative. The delicate chime of the wine glass resonated softly in the background, intertwining with the gentle hum of the fridge as his soft moans slipped away with every tightening embrace I bestowed upon him. I came back again, engulfed in a sense of helplessness, while he followed closely, letting out a fractured, anguished sound against my neck. After we lingered in each other's embrace for what seemed like an eternity, his head resting against my shoulder, his breath a cadence of unsteady whispers. "We find ourselves in a challenging situation," he observed. "I am cognizant, and I possess no inclination to stop. I am cognizant of that too." The next morning, I decided against avoiding him, though in hindsight, perhaps I ought to have. In place of conversation, I prepared 2 cups of coffee, setting his down on the counter quietly, allowing silence to envelop the moment, my lips sealed tight. He reappeared moments later, once again barefoot, his eyes still weighed down by the lingering traces of slumber. He looked at the cup, then shifted his eyes to me, giving no smile, merely a slight nod, as though we were quiet partners, weighed down by our mutual secret, ensnared in a wordless agreement. I savored a sip, casually leaning against the counter. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes darting discreetly toward my collarbone. The unvoiced occurrences of the night before hung in the atmosphere, tangible and heavy, saturating the stillness that surrounded us. Every time his hand brushed against mine by the sink, an undeniable urge to linger enveloped me, drawing me nearer than needed, prompting inquiries that needed no responses, offering help for chores he could effortlessly handle on his own. He permitted it, his eyes following me as I made my way out of the room. He hovered just a breath away as our paths intertwined in the hallway. Once, a spoon slipped from my fingers, and as we both bent down to retrieve it, our faces hovered just inches apart, suspended in a moment where neither of us dared to break the stillness. The scent of his skin hung in the atmosphere, a gentle, pure essence that had already infused my pillow. On the eve before, the details escape me, yet our lips found each other again, quick and passionate, evoking the essence of young lovers concealed behind a shut door. That evening, we cast aside all facades. It all commenced in the hallway. A brief glance, a soft touch, and then hands pulling at cloth before ideas could crystallize. He leaned in gently, pressing me against the wall, his lips and eager hands wandering with curiosity. "You're the sole thought that fills my mind," he murmured. "From dawn until dusk, even within her embrace, my heart yearns for you." I should have stepped in, should have encouraged him to leave, yet here I was, unzipping his jeans, my hand wrapping around him, warm and already yearning, as he released a groan into my mouth, as though he had been holding it back for hours. He raised my leg around his waist, his fingers sliding between my thighs, feeling the heat of my longing. "Jesus," he whispered softly. "Your essence flows like a gentle stream before me." A gentle sigh escaped my lips, my form bending gracefully in reaction. Since the instant our gazes intertwined in that reflection, a deep yearning for you has taken root within me. That broke him apart. He lifted me off my feet, moving through the hallway with determination, and pushed the guest room door open slightly with the force of his shoulder. Upon collapsing onto the bed, we found ourselves entwined, our mouths, skin, and limbs merging in an unquenchable thirst to consume one another. He plunged into my depths with remarkable speed. This time there shall be no light-hearted teasing, no questions posed. With welcoming arms, I welcomed every inch, every thrust that caused the headboard to crash against the wall. He let out a low groan, utterly consumed by the overwhelming intensity of the sensation. Your sense of well-being is remarkable. I dread that my strength may soon wane. In that case, refrain from doing so. I inhaled sharply. Just pass it to me if you would. He seized my hands above my head, our hips crashing together, sweat pooling between us, breath morphing into something primal and instinctive. We came together as though we were striving to immerse ourselves within each other. In the wake of it all, we were shrouded in quietude, our eyes drawn to the expanse of the ceiling above. His hand enveloped mine. "We have 2 more nights," he observed. I opted for silence. I knew I would relish each moment spent with them. The next day, I pulled aside the curtains to unveil a storm raging beyond the glass. The rain whispers gently against the windows as the wind orchestrates a delicate ballet among the trees. A photograph came from my daughter, encapsulating the spirit of the coast, with its radiant sun, golden sands, and joyful smiles. I found myself entranced by her smile, held captive in a moment that felt almost too intimate. She mirrored the essence of who I once was, before the burdens of regret took hold. As twilight descended, I stepped into the tender caress of the rain. The air beckoned to me, its coolness, a delightful caress upon my skin. I stepped off the porch, my bare feet meeting the cool earth as the rain poured down, soaking my shirt and embracing my skin with its refreshing touch. I lingered in that moment, a silhouette cloaked in the weighty veil of regret. At that instant, I felt his presence hovering just behind me. The door clicked shut, his footsteps softened by the moist grass below him. "What compels you to keep allowing me to enter your world?" he asked. "For I am tired of pretending that I am not hungry." His hand reached out, fingertips grazing the soaked fabric at my waist, pulling me nearer to him. Our bodies shimmered, smooth and barely clothed. His lips found mine, with a slow, burning passion, immersing us further into the experience. He peeled the shirt away from my skin under the downpour, kneeling before me, his lips gliding over the curves of my stomach, my hip, my thigh. He expressed his desire to make sure he approached this correctly, and he truly did. He tenderly laid me upon the cool, dewy grass, and we held one another as though the infinite expanse of time lay ahead of us. It should have reached its end beneath the relentless rain that night, yet it persisted. In the wake of it all, we discovered ourselves balancing precariously between recklessness and a daring boldness that urged us onward. We believed fervently that desire made us unstoppable, that it held the ability to forge a sanctuary strong enough to endure the looming downfall. We ended our watch for the night, drawn into the silence, the doors firmly closed against the world. As I entered the pantry, I beckoned him to join me, a spark igniting as his hand brushed against my lower back while I reached for the sugar. I kissed him with a longing that seemed to wish for him to dissolve into my essence. He lifted me onto a shelf, hiked up my skirt, and his fingers slipped inside me before I could even take a breath. "You're always ready for me," he whispered, his voice trembling as I sank my teeth into his shoulder. "Your presence has a remarkable ability to blur the edges of my reality, and I yearn for that brief reprieve, even if just for an instant." We moved forward in a tight silence, hearts racing and senses heightened. My breath was taken as he pressed his lips against mine. We fell just short of the conclusion. A sudden knock on the kitchen door startled us, causing us to flee like frightened teenagers. Yet the lingering ache persisted long after he had zipped up and departed, as if nothing had ever happened. A burgeoning resentment took root within me for the chasm that stretched between our touches, an unquenchable yearning for the melody of his voice, even in the fleeting instances when I was not wrapped in his embrace. We would meet in the most surprising of places. The back seat of his car lingered at the edge of the woods, the stairwell illuminated just after twilight. In the forlorn upstairs guest bathroom, I knelt down, drawing him into my mouth with a measured slowness that almost pushed him to the brink of insanity. "You're not real," he breathed, his eyes locked on the fluidity of my movements. "You are an image that will undoubtedly expose my very essence." Upon his arrival, I absorbed every detail, my eyes intertwining with his in a silent exchange. I yearned for him to engrave it into his memory for eternity. Indeed, dreams are ephemeral. With the dawn of her second morning back, the world around her transformed. She hummed again, twirling elegantly in the kitchen, her cheeks radiant with a lively glow. He settled next to her at the island, nodding, his smile broadening excessively. From my vantage point at the sink, with soap suds clinging to my hands, I felt my heart clawing at my chest. I witnessed the moment as her fingers lightly grazed his, the way he pulled back ever so slightly. And I was conscious of it. She felt it too. The betrayal has yet to unfold, not at this moment. Yet the shift, the fleeting peace, the deceit lingered in the air, akin to rot concealed beneath the floorboards. That evening, I made my way to his quarters. In the corridor, I hesitated until she entered the shower, the melody of music enveloping the space, resonating with a tune that grated on my nerves. I grasped his wrist, pulling him into the dim recesses of the guest room, pressing him firmly against the door. Once again, I whispered gently. He chose not to ask about the reason. He kissed me with a fervor that suggested an endless longing had been quenched at last. "I can't stop," he murmured, his lips grazing mine with a tantalizing softness. Then refrain, I had already murmured, had. With my back to the door, I grasped his belt and mounted him. His lips grazed my shoulder softly. My fingers wove through his hair. The faintest groan of the floorboards below us intensified the feeling of danger that lingered in the atmosphere. Utterly enchanting. "You're going to ruin me," he mourned. "You have already stated that," I inhaled sharply. "I have already achieved that feat." We pressed forward, a sense of urgency driving us as though we were escaping the unavoidable consequences. A palpable awareness enveloped us, signaling that the distance was narrowing. Upon my arrival, I bit into his shoulder, desperate to suppress my cries. He arrived moments later, plunging into the experience with fervor, trembling with intensity. In the ensuing silence, we shared not a single word. We remained in the dimness, breathless and broken. The silence surrounds us, thick with a sense of fate. Yet our silence was not as profound as we had envisioned. With the dawn of the new day, she had undergone a remarkable transformation, more brisk, quieter in tone. In quietude, she set about making the coffee. She held back from initiating any form of contact with him. And when she directed her eyes towards me, there was an absence of doubt. It seemed I had transformed into nothing more than a distant echo, gradually slipping from her heart, even if she stayed oblivious to the cause. As the evening unfolded, I discovered myself in solitude within my room, the door firmly sealed behind me. I stared into the mirror, my reflection revealed, unadorned beneath the soft embrace of a robe. I failed to secure it. The impressions on my thighs lingered, echoes of his grip that may have been just a shade too fierce. I let my fingers glide over the place where his lips had once rested, then silently slipped into the hallway. I restrained my tears, not in this moment. Yet, I felt a gathering storm on the horizon of everything we had built. He tapped gently, a hesitant note resonating in the quietude. I opted to remain silent. In that quiet moment, an essence of goodbye hung delicately in the atmosphere. He did not come back that night. No soft knock. In the stillness, there are no hidden truths. In the shadows, no hands trace the curve of my hip. I hovered in a state of eager expectation, restless and in motion, shifting from one spot to another, pacing, sitting, standing, opening the door only to close it again. The silence was unbearable, not because he was gone, but because of the fear that lingered in the void left behind. It was possible that he had chosen her. Perhaps guilt had in the end emerged victorious. It seemed he held a power that eclipsed my own. I longed to ignite the flames of anger deep within my soul. Yet all I felt was a deep void, as if he had taken pieces of me I hadn't known I had relinquished. The next day, he utterly avoided my presence. He took his place beside her again, offering her the comfort of leaning against him. His lips curved into a smile as she unveiled something on her phone. I remained in the kitchen, watching them with the detached curiosity of an observer. She graciously offered an invitation for coffee. Her voice resonated with a melodic sweetness, while her eyes told a different story. They scrutinized me intently, assessing my proportions, as though she held a hidden truth, or perhaps something far more foreboding. She felt a tremor deep inside, yearning for the affirmation she craved. I navigated my way through feelings of gratitude and left the room, my heart racing, a warning beat resonating within me. That afternoon, he found me among the blossoms of the garden. I discovered myself pretending to prune the lavender, though my hands shook with an uncontrollable tremor. He sank to his knees beside me, his voice a mere breath against the silence. "It is imperative that we put an end to this." I turned my eyes away from him. "You have indeed achieved that already." His hand grazed mine gently, evoking a sense of regret. "It has surpassed my deepest longings." A gentle, bitter chuckle slipped from my lips, laced with an air of fragility. It was never destined to unfold. It centered on what we had seized. What was vital, not merely what was fair. He stared at the ground that separated us. "Last night, she asked me about my happiness." I paused for a brief moment. "What was your implication?" "I was not honest." Once again, he emerged from the shadows, cloaked in the mystery of night. He chose to remain silent. Upon crossing the threshold, I find myself enveloped in the familiar embrace of my room. As the house succumbed to silence, I settled into the embrace of my bed. Her rose-blue eyes were wide open, reflecting a world of wonder. He nestled beside me, and I instinctively leaned into his warmth. Our lips remained untouched. Not at this moment. He enveloped me in his embrace, his face resting gently against my neck. My fingers trembled as they glided over my ribs. She senses his whisper. I nodded in assent. She chooses to remain silent on the matter. At this time, no. Nevertheless, it persists. Within the gaps that exist between every word, an intimate moment was not shared between us. This is not the inaugural instance. We held on to each other, a silent urgency surrounding us, as though we were bracing for the approaching turmoil. At last, his lips found theirs, a slow, sorrowful, and treacherous union. His hands moved across my body, carving the farewell into his essence. I cleared a path for him, grant him passage. As he entered, it was neither forceful nor wild. The impact was deeply shattering. He advanced with a measured pace, as though he grasped that this would be the last instance I would permit anyone to delve into my innermost being. I wrapped my legs around him, my nails gliding gently along his back. Our foreheads met, and he whispered phrases that constricted my throat. You have sharpened my vision. Your presence has led to the fading of my recollections. A chill of dread enveloped me. You were never just a mistake. I entered quietly, my eyes fixed, unwavering, captured by his stare. Upon his arrival, he spoke my name as though it were a hidden truth finally brought to light. He remained until the first light of dawn started to emerge, slipping away like a soft murmur in the darkness. The next day, she locked eyes with me in a way that was both captivating and unsettling, her smile brightening the atmosphere around us. However, it fell short of genuine expression. In that instant, I grasped that the most profound heartbreak emerges when one holds the truth, yet finds themselves immobilized, unsure of how to proceed. She extended an invitation for me to accompany her for lunch. Just the two of us, without Thomas. Forsake all devices. She conveyed a deep sense of longing for my presence, reminiscing about the cherished moments spent with her mother. We found ourselves nestled in a charming little cafe, a spot she held dear from her high school years. In those early moments, everything seemed almost mundane. She spoke of the wedding favors, the colors, the blossoms that twirled in her imagination. I nodded in assent, allowing a smile to grace my lips at precisely the appropriate intervals. Yet I felt her gaze upon me with a weight that was nearly tangible, as if she were weaving a magnificent tapestry. In that moment, as her thoughts hung in the air, she fell silent. With a delicate touch, she set her fork down upon the table. With a gentle grace, she rested her hands on the table, her fingers woven together in a delicate embrace. As she spoke once more, her voice held a steady cadence, though it was devoid of any softness. "Is he sharing your bed?" I remained motionless, my body frozen in that instant. The cafe enveloping us thrummed with an ever-changing energy, the delicate symphony of plates softly clinking in harmonious rhythm. The sound of laughter dances through the atmosphere. Still, I pressed forward. It seemed that every essence of my being was captured within the profound depths of her gaze. What I gently whispered. Still, she held back from inquiring again. She knew that I could sense it in the tautness of her jawline. She stayed unblinking, a steadfast gaze that held its ground. "Please, just tell me," she implored. "I would be grateful if you could reply without any additional nudging." I opened my mouth, then closed it tightly. My fingers trembled gently at the edge of my glass. I may have opted for deception. One could have participated in the act of gaslighting. She may have maintained that her anxieties were simply the result of a vivid imagination. Yet I opted against it, for the truth had been building inside her, a quiet cry yearning to break free. and I could no longer hold it back. "I didn't mean to," I whispered gently. Her gaze held me captive, extending into an infinite moment. Within her, there resided an essence. A soft crack resonated in the stillness of the air. "What is the length of time?" "Since the moment you left that weekend." Her hands clenched into tight fists at the mere mention of him. "Every time I revealed my affection for him." "You were entirely ready." She paused, diverting my gaze elsewhere. "I had not anticipated that it would unravel in such a manner," I observed. "Yet you permitted it to unravel," she echoed with mounting fervor. "Inside the sanctuary of my abode, in the company of my beloved fiancé." "I acknowledge what I have expressed before. I am acutely conscious of my choices." She stood up. Curiosity flickered in their eyes. Still, she showed no signs of concern. In one fluid gesture, she grasped her bag and keys, delivering a solitary remark. "It shall be forever imprinted in the tapestry of my memory. You have ceased to be my mother." She ventured out into the world beyond her door. There was no glance over the shoulder. I remained at the table, the check lying before me. Long after it had been presented, I came back to a home that seemed only half alive. Thomas had vanished. She had vanished. The wedding has been canceled. Her father sat in silence, his lips sealed, providing no inquiries. He took his leave merely a fortnight later. He asserted that he had lost the ability to love me. I noted that I had spent many years as an outsider. Still, he remained unaware until the moment had faded into the past. The guest room has transformed into my haven for rest. Now, the fragrance hangs in the air, a haunting echo of his existence. There are nights when I awaken, my hand gently resting between my thighs, in search of an essence that slips through my fingers. As I linger on the porch, my thoughts wander to the possibility that he might ever ponder my presence. Should he remember the taste of my being, the tunes I summoned in the midst of the downpour, the way I whispered his name as though it were a treasured secret? Only we possess the merit. Nevertheless, I hold a more profound insight. He is probably rebuilding in a different place, amidst the presence of one who exudes confidence, and my daughter. She sends out postcards, succinct and to the point, honorable, never end with warmth. At times, I find myself contemplating whether my desire for her eclipses my craving for the soothing embrace of a tender caress. At times, I reflect on whether this tranquility is truly what I have rightfully attained. He held the title of my daughter's fiancé, and I was the woman who chose deprivation over dignity. The wound lingers, still unhealed. It simply changes its shape,